Booyakasha! Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Justin and Donald Save America. As always, I'm your host, Donald Kendal. Joining me, I've got Justin Haskins right above me. We're going to be talking about Greta Thunberg. We're going to talk about her potential radicalization and a little bit more on the whole climate change topics. But before we get into any of that, I have to put that little call out there that if you like this show, you want to see more, the easiest thing that you can do to help us out is just hitting the like button, hitting the subscribe button, leaving a comment even. And all these things are free things that you can do that help us break through the algorithm and make sure that more eyes see our content. Justin Haskins, how you doing today?
I'm doing very well. I was just thinking as you were just doing the introduction there that maybe we should consider, instead of asking people to subscribe if they like the channel, we should just ask them to subscribe even if they don't like the channel.
Yeah, if you hate the channel, make sure to subscribe.
Yeah. Do you hate the algorithms? Do you hate YouTube's algorithm? Yeah. Forget about whether you like us. Do you just hate the algorithm? If so, then you should subscribe. How about that?
Right. So Justin, I don't know if we have to get into like how the sausage is made when it comes to us picking topics, but this one kind of came across my Twitter feed. I saw somebody sharing an article like this about Greta, and it made it just like, I think you and I had like a pretty long conversation about just like where her path lies ahead of her. And I was making the case that I think she's going to become, like, give it like 5 years, I think she's going to become like a radical in this movement. I'm not sure if you agreed with that sentiment, but I thought, you know what, this is a pretty good topic area for Justin and Donald Save America. So first off, Greta Thunberg, you've said in the past that you actually like her. Do you want to clarify a little bit?
Yeah, I actually
context a little?
Yeah, the funny thing is a lot of people talk about Greta, they kind of put her in the same camp as, like, I don't know, like an AOC or just like Al Gore or, somebody like that. But it's actually really unfair, I think, to treat her that way, because the thing about most of the people who are involved in the climate movement, not all of them, but a lot of them, especially the big figurehead type people and the political figures and the heads of these big environmental groups and stuff, is that most of them they're just your typical schemers. They're politicians. A lot of them, I don't think, even really truly believe at 100% of what they say about climate change. They might think climate change is a problem. They might think climate change is being caused by humans. But do they think that the world is literally about to end? No, I don't think so. I really don't.
You're talking about like the Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yeah, I don't think he really believes that. Otherwise,
Hollywood types out there.
Right, and that's why and we don't need to get into all the hypocrisy, right? But that's why the Hollywood celebrities build houses on the beach. That's why Barack Obama has a house on Martha's Vineyard in an area that's supposedly going to be flooded, according to people who produced a report under his administration. That's why you get, politicians bringing 20,000 bureaucrats to Glasgow for the climate summit that they're still having right now. Why do they do these things? Well, it's because I don't think they really believe in the severity of it, but Greta does. See, so if you believe in the underlying, and I guess this is the point, if you believe in the underlying assumption that Greta bases every other belief on, which is that human beings are literally all going to die because of climate change, which is being caused by human beings. If you believe these two ideas, that humans are causing it and that we're all going to die from it, then everything else she does actually makes sense.
Sure.
Everything stems from that point. Whereas that's not true for the other people, right?
Yeah.
If you're Al Gore, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, we've said it a million times. I'll say it again. The Green New Deal, like why was 9/10 of that climate like not related? It was about free college and universal health care and like free internet or something like that. It's like, if you really thought the world was ending, why would you spend 1 second or 1 penny dealing with anything else?
I think if I remember right, and it's been a while since I looked at the actual breakdown of it, but if I remember right, the most expensive provision in the bill was the federal jobs guarantee.
Hmm.
But why do you care if there's a federal jobs guarantee if we're all going to die from
Right.
climate change? Don't we need to deal with that first? Shouldn't literally every penny we have go to that?
Yeah, and
That
then
should be the sole purpose of the Green New Deal.
of course, like AOC's former chief of staff or something like
Yeah,
that
chief of
has
staff.
some
Yep.
quote out there saying, like, "Oh, did you think the New Deal was an environment thing? Oh no, we thought of it as like a changing the entire economy thing." So
Right.
there's that. Now compare that to some of these speeches given by Greta Thunberg, where she talks about how like the world is on fire, the house is on fire, we need to start acting like it. She says, "I want you guys to panic."
Right.
Because it seems like to me, unless she's just really good at acting, she truly believes that we are on, we're in a perilous position when it comes to climate and the
She's
potential extinction of humanity.
she's not good at acting. She's really not good at much of anything, to be totally honest. She's not a very charismatic person. She's good at scolding people, I guess.
She's a good
But
scold.
she's a good scold, and she's passionate and committed. And those things I respect, not the scolding, but the passion and the commitment.
Sure.
And that's something that she is, and she lives by her principles. So when she says air travel is destroying the planet and we're all going to die from it, so she gets on a boat and takes the boat from the across the Atlantic like we're living in 1720, right, to come to America to give a speech where she then lambastes the political leaders of the world who mostly agree with her about just about everything in terms of policy because they're not doing enough fast enough.
Right.
I look at that and I say, if I believed in all the underlying assumptions that she believes, then I would sympathize with that. I may not exactly do what she does, but I would at least say, yeah, that's exactly the sort of thing a person should be doing if they believe the world's about to end from climate change.
Right.
But none of these people actually believe that. She's like the only one in the group.
Right.
And that's the point. That's the point. There are lots of regular people who believe it because they've been told it over and over and over again. But the vast majority of the political leaders and the heads of corporations and heads of big banks and all these people that say that they care about the climate change issue, they don't actually believe that because they don't live their lives like they believe it.
Right. Yeah, and then of course she got her claim to fame was obviously climate change rhetoric and all of that, but given a couple of different speeches at Davos, different UN things, these COP meetings, and all of that. That's how she got kind of the international fame that came along with this. So that's her story. Only goes back 3 years. She's only really been in the public spotlight for a handful of years, and again, a lot of it was because of these big international speeches that she was doing. The more recent COP26 and some of her appearances for some of these like climate strike events or youth for climate action events, it seems like her strategy is turning a little bit. Not completely. It's still a little bit consistent with like her. Like again, she was scolding the UN people, like even at these Davos meetings, like the "how dare you, you're stealing my childhood" type of thing. So this new turn for her definitely has some seeds back in those days. But the first article that I have here, this is based on some of her recent comments where she said that COP26 is a failure and that she condemns the UN Climate Summit as a greenwash festival. So if you go down, you got actually a transcript of her speech that she had given recently. It says, "It's not a secret that COP26 is a failure. It should be obvious that we cannot solve a crisis with the same methods that got us into it in the first place. And more people are starting to realize this. Many are starting to ask themselves, what will it take for people in power to wake up? But it is clear they're already awake. They know exactly what they're doing. They know exactly what priceless values they are sacrificing to maintain business as usual. The leaders are not doing nothing. They are actively creating loopholes and shaping frameworks to benefit themselves and to continue profiting from the destructive system. This is an active choice by leaders to continue to let the exploitation of people and nature and the destruction of present and future living conditions to take place. And she talks about how COP26 is basically just a big PR stunt. She keeps referring to the global north countries, which I thought was a little strange, but that comes up multiple times. And then she says, that this is an exclusionary COP event and that it's basically nothing else but a greenwash festival, a 2-week long celebration of business as usual and blah, blah, blah. So, Justin, do those comments strike you as being a little surprising at the very least? What do you think? Coming from her?
I mean, sort of. A little, I guess a little surprising, maybe. I mean, I'm not surprised that she thinks this. I'm a little surprised that she's saying it. Because the thing is, although I agree that people are not, and if you read other parts of her comments, I don't know if they were published there or not, but other parts of the things she says, she's essentially saying, look, we have to do like radical things today. Right. We don't have time to go 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, slowly reduce. No, it's got to be done right now. Now, all the people in these decisions, all these people in these rooms making these decisions, all these policymakers and their staffers and everything, they all know that if we actually switched, because why don't they just switch right now? If they all believe in green energy so much, why don't they all just switch to windmills and solar panels today? Why don't we just do it? Just do it. Why not? We're spending trillions of dollars we don't have anyway. What does it matter? It's not a financial issue anymore. Why don't we just do it? The reason is because they know it doesn't work. That's why. They know it doesn't work. And by doesn't work, I mean you can't run whole advanced societies on it exclusively. You can have it as part of the mix, but you can't have it as your primary source of energy. It's not possible. And so they know that. And so they know that if they actually tried to do the things that Greta is suggesting, you would have Great Depressions.
Sure.
In the entire Western world. Every country would collapse into, poverty and crime, and there would be no reliable energy sources. They know that. They can't do it. So the real reason why so they all understand that. And you know what? She might understand that too. But the thing is, in her mind, it's either that or death. So if you are faced with post-apocalyptic, everybody loses their job, collapse of society, or everyone's dead, you still choose the post-apocalyptic, everything's terrible, economies are crashing, things are really bad.
Right.
There is nothing worse than everyone dying. Like, that's the thing. That's the worst outcome from a policy perspective. If you have a policy that leads to everyone dying, that's the worst policy. And that's Greta's point. Her whole point is, you guys need to just forget about all that other crap. Forget about profits and GDP and economic numbers and employment and blah, 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 blah. And just save us from death.
The blah, 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 blah. That's right. Because
that's what she says. Yeah. Right. I didn't even try. I wasn't even trying. That's what I'm saying.
Your kindred spirits.
Yes. And so I get that. Where I don't agree with her is I don't think that we're all about to die from climate change. So I'm not worried about it. However, I will say this. The one thing that I do think she gets wrong is I don't think that it's quite fair to say business as usual. I do think they're doing other things, and I do think those things are going to have a significant impact on society. It's not what she wants, but I do think they are actually trying to make
that's
changes.
a very important part, and I was gonna bring that up too, and because we did an entire episode 2, I think, maybe, I don't know, we did an entire episode on the Great Reset and what's really going on COP26. I think COP26 episode was episode number 3. But like there are actual big things happening down there or up there. I don't know. And it's like, does she not get the memo? Like this stuff is happening. There's like we're almost being boxed into a corner here where all of the world's corporations and all of this are all coming together to make sure that we all do these ESG standard type things to make sure that we all go in this direction.
Yeah.
So like what more could she be asking for?
It's a little like the people who are the hardcore single payer healthcare people and on the left, and they don't want to hear about more healthcare subsidies or making health insurance cheaper. They don't care. Like, don't tell me
blah,
about any
blah,
of that.
blah.
Right. I don't care. Do we have government-run healthcare or not? No? Okay, well, that's a problem. We need government-run healthcare. That's how those people think about that issue. They don't even want to debate it. It's just healthcare is a human right. Everybody gets health insurance from the government. End of story. Anything short of that is akin to, Mao murdering people in the streets. That's essentially how a lot of those people talk about that issue. Well, in her mind, I think it's the same thing. Are there things happening that are different than before? I bet she knows that there are. But she probably thinks to herself, are we gonna have zero CO2 emissions 2 years from now? No? Yeah. Okay, well then we're all gonna die. So, and this is the problem. The irony of this situation is, and this is the thing with the left, is that they use this crazy, crazy, crazy rhetoric on a bunch of things. It's not just climate change, but it's on a bunch of things. Then some people actually believe it. And when they live their lives logically consistent with the rhetoric, everyone's like, whoa, what's going on? And it's like, well, it's because they believed the rhetoric. Like, for example, when you say that all cops are racist and are mass murdering black people in the streets and there's an epidemic of police brutality and blah, 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 then is it not surprising that there's a bunch of people who say, well, let's just get rid of these people? Why do we even have police? Right? Or when you have politicians saying during the Trump administration, I don't think I would take a vaccine produced during the Trump era, because how can we trust it? Yeah. And then there's a bunch of people afterwards who are like, I'm not taking a vaccine that you guys rushed through the process. And all of a sudden it's like, well, these people are crazy. And this is just another example of it. It's like, when Bernie Sanders, when we watched that CNN town hall in 2020, 2019 or 2020 for the election, when they had all the Democratic Party during the primaries, they had the big,
we should revisit that. We should have an episode where we revisit that.
It was a CNN, for those of you who don't know, it was like a CNN telethon-like event.
It was like 7 hours long. Change. They had all of the primary candidates on the Democrats.
It was
one
literally
after the other.
It was literally like 7 hours long.
Yeah.
And it was nonstop, one candidate after another going up talking about climate change. And all of them, like seriously, themselves. All of them said crazy, crazy, crazy stuff to appeal to the far left-wing climate zealot people. And some of them talked about maybe we need to stop eating meat. Some of them talked about real severe restrictions. Bernie Sanders, I think, was that the one where he suggested maybe we do need to have fewer children or something like that? I think one of them, I don't know if it was that event or a different one. But the bottom line is this.
Yeah, no, you're right. It was someone in the crowd. Someone in the crowd said, should we start considering doing like some population control stuff? And he's like, we should consider it or something like that.
Yeah, it's something like that. I don't remember. We should go back and do it because it was hilarious. But the bottom line is this. They had that big, gigantic event, and it was a huge spectacle, and one candidate after another, these are the top people in the Democratic Party, one of them ended up becoming president of the United States. One of them after another, one after one after one, got up there and said, it's an existential threat.
Yeah.
Humanity is at risk.
Right.
We could all die from climate change. So then there are people out there who hear that and think, oh my God, we're all going to die.
Yeah.
And when people actually start living that way, then they have to start questioning, why aren't you people in Davos and in Glasgow and in Washington and wherever else doing more to save us from imminent existential, crisis? Why aren't you doing more? And that's where there's this disconnect. Mm-hmm. Now, you and I look at that and say it's because they're all full of crap. And obviously, this should be a sign that you shouldn't listen to these people.
Right.
But for whatever reason, Greta doesn't make that connection. And I don't understand why.
I was gonna play Greta's blah 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 speech, but I think people got the gist of it.
I think I said blah 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 like 4 times.
Yeah, that too. Again, your kindred spirits. So yeah, we'll just gloss over that she was basically saying that these people are all talk and no substance when it comes to the rubber actually meeting the road. So I'll skip over that. You can find it, but this is a newer one. I think this took place just outside of COP26. They were doing a rally. So let me pull this up. One thing to note, there is some salty language in this. There is one part that will probably get us demonetized. So I'll try to take the volume out when that part comes up. But this is Greta at one of these rallies outside COP26.
You can shove your climate crisis up your arse. You can shove your climate crisis up your arse. You can shove your climate crisis. You can shove your climate crisis. You can shove your climate crisis up your arse.
That's she's 18. Like that, she does not look like an 18-year-old. She still looks like she's 14 or 15.
She's probably 52.
Inside COP, they're just politicians and people in power pretending to take our future seriously, pretending to take the present seriously of the people who are being affected already today by the climate crisis. Change is not going to come from inside there. That is not leadership. This is leadership. This is what leadership looks like.
Is she talking about like the group or herself? I don't know.
It'd be kind of weird if she was talking about herself, but I also think it'd be weird to talk about a bunch of losers outside the building as the leaders. I don't know.
We say no more blah, blah, blah. No more exploitation of people and nature and the planet. No more exploitation. No more blah, blah, blah. No more whatever.
She dropped an F-bomb, sorry.
We're sick and tired of it, and we're gonna make the change, whether they like it or not.
Yeah.
They have to keep on going for too long. We're not gonna let them get away anymore. We are not.
Okay.
So
well,
again,
I wonder what she means by that.
Yes, that's what I mean. Like, you know, if it's Greta and she's like this little sweetheart little girl and all of this, I feel like people give her like a pass. But if that was, you know, some other like radical type of guy out there, maybe the head of the Extinction Rebellion, which we should probably talk about, saying that exact thing, I think he'd be on like an FBI watch list at this point.
See, that's the thing. And this is the interesting thing about all of this is she is still so normally what the elites do on the left, and if people pay attention, this is a cycle that happens over and over and over again. You'll see this over and over and over again. You get somebody who rises up like a Greta from out of nowhere, you know, and the elites sort of like pick that person to be somebody important. And they say, they essentially say, we're going to turn this person into a spokesperson for XYZ movement. Mm-hmm. They pick someone. Mm-hmm. This has happened a million different times. And this person becomes, or people, sometimes it's a group of people, but it becomes, they're the ones, right? And then what they do is they bring them in to the club. And they shower them with awards, and they put their faces on Time magazine, and they make them celebrities, and they invite them to Met galas and all of this because they want them to become an elite too. Because they want to be liked by these people, and they want they want them to be simpatico on everything, right? So we see this with AOC. AOC is a great example of it. AOC came out of nowhere. She became anointed. When she started out, she was a woman of the people. Now she goes to the Met Gala wearing $20,000 dresses or $40,000 or whatever it was, saying tax the rich while she's surrounded by super rich people in a super rich dress while she's living with 2 houses and also is becoming super rich.
Sure.
So they made AOC elite, right? That's what they did. They turned her into an elite. And they do this with all sorts of people. But with Greta, it's not working. Like they did all these things and they tried to make her an elite and they invited her into the clubhouse and they showered her with attention and they put her on Time magazine. They did all the things they know how to do, invited all the parties. And then what? She stands outside, these same people, just within a few years of this all happening, she stands outside their stupid conference and she starts chanting, you know, you can shove it up your A, basically, to a bunch of people who just got finished showering her with attention. None of them have ever said anything bad about her publicly.
No, right.
Guarantee it.
Sure.
But she hates them anyway. And that's the thing. So is she going to survive this in terms of publicly? I don't think she cares because she wouldn't do this if she cared. She does not care about her reputation, clearly. Mm-hmm. But are they going to allow this to go on and on and on and on.
Well,
no.
see, this is what I mean,
I say
man.
no way will they allow this.
She's too ingrained into just like the modern pop culture for her to just disappear. If they stop doing all of this and stop, inviting her to these things and stop putting her on the front of Time magazine or whatever you're saying, like, she is still like a common household name for, people that are interested in this topic, left or right.
I totally disagree with you.
You think
totally
so?
Disagree with you, and here's why. I brought this up to you the other day, not on camera, but I brought this up to you the other day.
I don't listen to you when we're not on camera.
Well, yeah. Well, you barely listen to me when we're on camera. So, Cindy Sheehan. If you're older, you remember who Cindy Sheehan is. For those of you who don't remember or are not old enough to remember, Cindy Sheehan was super famous. Everybody knew Cindy Sheehan. This is why I remember her name. I wasn't even that old when she was popular. She rose to prominence during the height of the anti-Iraq war movement during the George W. Bush presidency. Right before...
She's Code Pink. Yeah.
Code Pink and all that. She was right before... especially, it was right before his re-election. So 2004. It was right before that. She became super, super popular as the face of the anti-war movement. She was a mom. She is still a mom. Her child died in the Iraqi war, if I remember right. Iraq or Afghanistan, I can't remember. But she was totally opposed to the war. That was part of it. It was her personal story. Code Pink was anti-war, and it was a big thing. And she was everywhere. She camped outside of George Bush's ranch in Texas or something like that. There was nonstop news coverage of her. She was on every big television show. That's why I remember her name all these years later. I was a teenager when that happened. Yeah, same with you, right? We weren't even old enough to really be paying super close attention to this, and yet we still remember it. Then Barack Obama became president, and the war was still happening. The war didn't go away, still there. And Cindy Sheehan, guess what Cindy Sheehan did? Because she's just like Greta. She was a true believer. She's a true believer. And she kept bad-mouthing the administration, except now it's a new administration, because they refused to get out of the war in Iraq.
Okay.
And what did they do? They disappeared her.
Yeah.
They just pretended like she didn't exist. And now we never hear about Cindy Sheehan anymore. She's probably still protesting somewhere.
I'm going to give her a Google
She probably is. And nobody knows anything about her anymore. And if you're like a teenager right now, you have no clue who Cindy Sheehan is. You have no idea at all. And that's because the media literally gave up on talking about Cindy Sheehan after years of her being prominent.
There's a big difference, I think. There's a big difference because you're right. All of that timeline that you just laid out is absolutely right. The difference is the left dropped the anti-war rhetoric when Barack Obama became president, largely. So then the topic was just out of mind, out of sight, out of mind. So she was out of sight, out of mind. I don't think the left will ever drop climate change. So, like, it's still going to be a topic, and I think Greta is always going to be in that conversation.
I'll give you another example related to climate change specifically. Michael Moore. Michael Moore is a darling of the left. Everybody loves Michael Moore on the left. He had Bowling for Columbines, the anti-gun movie. He did Fahrenheit 9/11, right, or whatever. That was the big anti-George Bush movie. Then he had The Sicko, which was the anti-private health insurance thing. He wanted government-run health insurance, and he was a darling. Everyone loved him. Then he produced a movie, a documentary, directed by Jeff Gibbs, which you talked about before, Planet of the Humans.
Which, if you have not watched, you should. It's great.
You should watch it. It basically is about renewable energy and how renewable energy sources like windmills and solar panels really don't work. It's all a big scam, and these environmental groups are all getting lots of money from it, and there's big corporations profiting from all this stuff.
It's not going to help the climate.
It's not going to help the climate, not going to help the environment. There's all sorts of environmental problems related to these things, and that it's all a giant scam. Now, he's a true believer that global warming is a crisis. He thinks that we could perish from this. I don't know exactly what his, ideas are as far as how serious it is, but he treats it very, very seriously. It's not like he doesn't care about climate change. He really cares about it. But he put out this movie criticizing the green energy establishment and the corporate media and the John Kerrys and Al Gores of the world. And guess what happened? he's gone.
Yeah,
Nobody cares
seriously,
about
that's
him
a good
anymore.
point. I haven't even
Nobody
heard
cares
of him.
about him. And that was climate.
He's a little bit more like multi-layered with his stuff, right? So
Oh, he's multi-layered. That's for sure.
Well, okay, so I don't know. We'll see, I guess, what happens with her. But like, I think that give it like 5 years, assuming that she doesn't just find some other thing to be interested in, or I don't know. But I think she could fall into some of these more radical groups like Extinction Rebellion. So if you have followed us on any of the other stuff that we've ever done, whether it's Stopping Socialism TV and the Tank podcast, you probably heard Justin and I talk about the Extinction Rebellion. If you just kind of pay attention to the news, you probably see them. Although I think the group is a little bit more active in the UK, throughout Europe, and not so much in the United States. But just recently, like a couple of weeks ago, they made some headlines when they blocked one of the highways just outside of New York City. With these signs, as you can see in this picture here, they have this roadblock and their signs, our house is on fire. And their message was basically like, we need the importance of this climate change catastrophe that's coming is so important that it's far more important than you getting to work on time or getting home on time or something like that. Like, we need to bring this to the public's attention, or else we're all going to die, type of a thing. And they've done a number of protests, again, I think mostly throughout the UK, but they're the ones that like sprayed like fake blood on like the Parliament building or some type of public building. They routinely glue themselves to this or that, whether it's like the front of banks or in the street or something. They're always gluing themselves to something. But like or another one that got a lot of attention was they were like on top of the trains that people would take to get home in the UK. And, the trains couldn't leave. So the protesters were eventually pulled down by the angry crowd.
They're the most annoying for the people of especially like England or London. They're like the most annoying people.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. And just expect to see more of this in the United States. It's an attention grabbing thing. That's their own.
It hasn't really caught on here yet.
Not yet, but we also...
It will.
Yeah, it definitely will.
I mean, if you thought Black Lives Matter's burning police stations down, not that everyone involved in that did that, obviously, but if you thought that some part of the BLM movement being super radical, burning police stations down is bad, wait until this catches on amongst the Antifa type people, and they have a justification. Because again, if you think everything's about to...
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, right. This right here, as annoying as it is exactly consistent with that belief structure that the world is on fire and we all have 10 years before we're all dead. Like, if you truly believe that,
this makes
you
sense.
would be doing stuff like this.
This makes total sense.
Yeah,
it makes It's not just that it's like, well, I guess I can understand it now if you think about it that way. I'm saying you would almost be like a terrible person for not trying to do everything possible to stop it if you really truly believe we're all about to die.
Sure.
Right? So that's how they look at this. Like, it's an asteroid that's headed for Earth to wipe out Earth, except we're the ones that make the asteroid, and we can just stop making the asteroid, right?
Someone's been watching a lot of Frankie the Dinosaur at the
Well, I've learned a lot from that CGI dinosaur that they rolled out at the UN or Glasgow or whatever.
Right. But yeah, so, I could see phase 2 of Greta Thunberg being part of something more like this than giving nice, rosy speeches at the UN. That's my basic premise for this episode.
Yeah,
and only time will tell.
Yeah.
I'm curious for everyone that's listening to this to chime in what they think.
I agree with that too. I think that's where she ends up. My point is, are they going to give her attention?
Sure.
Or are they going to ignore her? And that's the part of it that I think they will inevitably ignore her, because she does not... Is she helping the elites or hurting the elites by trashing them and shouting profanity at them and doing all of that? Does she make them look good by doing that? No. And so they will squash her like a bug. They don't care. That's my prediction. Now, maybe not. Maybe she's so famous, and if she does it quickly enough, and she's so famous, maybe the media will have no choice but to give her attention. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, so I got let's call in the experts for what they think about all of this, the psychology behind this. So I've got the Washington Post. Democracy dies in the darkness, Washington Post. So I wanted to find. I thought the radicalization of Greta being the kind of the premise of all of this. I thought let's see what the establishment talks about when they talk about radicalization. So I just did a Google search, some keywords or whatever, and this pops up. And of course, I knew, we're not dumb here. I knew that this was going to be the case. It was all going to be framed around, white nationalism or something like that, the extreme right, the alt-right or something like that, and what's leading to the radicalization of young kids that find themselves in the alt-right. And I thought, what, this is fine. Let's look through this and see if there's any parallels with what they're attributing to these alt-right people, these potential alt-right people, and the Extinction Rebellion types, the ones that are really extremists about climate alarmism. So I want to spend a little time just kind of going through this article. So youth radicalization is on the rise. Here's what we know about it. And of course, you got some tiki torch people or whatever. What drives youth radicalization?
Hold on, just real quick. That was so long ago, by the way.
Well, I know.
The fact that they're still talking about that is
that was
a year old. Long ago. Okay, but when did that happen? That was at the beginning of the Trump
this
presidency?
This
right?
article is from 2017, but I'm
okay.
sure
So this article is kind of old too.
Yeah, but still, it's the whole point of just radicalization. The psychology behind it doesn't age, right?
No. I just meant the tiki torch thing. That's all.
Yeah. So the opening of the opening paragraphs of this talk about some research that they've done, and credit to the Washington Post. A lot of this is kind of based around just almost like terrorism and Islamic radicals and all of that. And of course, they have to tie that to potential white supremacists, but whatever. Again, that's just par for the course. But so I just want to go through some of the things that they find as commonalities behind just general radicalization. So from our focus group, youths who were the most susceptible to radical messaging were those who perceived themselves to be politically and or economically marginalized, resulting in a pervasive sense of purposelessness and lack of hope for the future. So just imagine for a minute that this article, instead of having this tiki torch guy here, it was a picture of Greta Thunberg or something, right? So just the whole idea of being politically or economically marginalized, right? So even the conference that's being held in Davos or Glasgow, whatever, that's all dedicated to the cause that you are putting yourself up as the figurehead for, even they aren't enough on your team for you to be happy with it, right? So Greta is clearly politically or economically marginalized by them, okay? Pervasive sense of purposelessness and lack of hope for the future. She talks about how our world is on fire, the house is on fire, and these people aren't doing anything about it at all. Again, I think that means that she's got a lack of hope for the future. However, it is not the poor socioeconomic status itself that pointed towards susceptibility, but rather a sense of relative deprivation, coupled with feelings of political and or social exclusion. For example, uneven development in rural areas fed a narrative that central government authorities only serve the interests of the urban elites. Okay, so this is another thing, and I did read this article yesterday, so I'm not sure exactly where it is in here, but it's basically people use these ideologies as conduits. This is me paraphrasing them, as conduits to basically blame something else for any difficulties or things that they're upset about in their life, right? And if climate change is not exactly that, everything that's wrong in society and capitalism and all of this stuff is contributes to climate change, and all of the problems in society are because of climate change. It's that to me just screams when you're reading through this and you're seeing all of that stuff, it just screams climate change to me. Justin, you think I'm grasping at straws here?
No, I think you're absolutely right. Every time there's a hurricane, it's because of climate change, or it's worse because of climate change. Every time there's a giant snowstorm, it was worse because of climate change. Every time there's a year where there isn't enough snow, it's worse because of climate change. Everything that happens, there are many news reports out there. You can look them up that blame the rise of like the Taliban and Al Qaeda and stuff on climate change. Wars in Africa on climate change. Everything is because of climate change. So. Right. Yeah, it absolutely has become, if people actually start to believe that and think to themselves, well, XYZ problem is ultimately because of climate change, then for sure, it fits perfectly in with that line of thinking, without a doubt.
Yeah, another thing talks about how like it's not necessarily like, you know, religion, although like religion can be used to kind of like push this. And at the very end of Michael Schellenberger's book, Apocalypse Never, he makes the case that climate change and climate change activism is basically taking the place of religion for a lot of these youths. And he lays it out. It's a beautiful layout of this concept, but basically how it's like, it's got its saints and its sinners. It's got its path towards redemption. It's got its like devil characters. Like it has all of the things that you could also find inside of religion. But because we're, you know, a more increasingly secular society and all of that, and, you know, nihilistic, our youth is becoming more and more nihilistic. They gravitate towards climate change to kind of serve the purpose that their lack of religion, you know, leaves, right? So like all of this to me just feeds this thing that like, if you want to see like real radicalization, keep your eye on climate change and keep your eye on this Extinction Rebellion stuff. There was a couple of stories back when like the pipeline, Keystone XL pipeline thing was like the big news. And I think it was during like the Trump era, where there was like vandalizing of these pipelines and people were like drilling holes into it. So it's beyond like, it's getting to the point where it's beyond just like, spray painting or spraying fake blood on stuff. Like I think it's going to get a lot crazier, especially when this rhetoric, you know, from these places that you're supposed to trust, like the United Nations and all of this, once that rhetoric continues to get crazier and crazier and the timeline of our potential demise gets shorter and shorter, I think you're going to see a lot more radicalization. And again, I wouldn't be surprised if Greta Thunberg was increasingly part of this group.
Well, and I think this is really important for people to understand, because I'm not suggesting that white supremacy, obviously there are white supremacists that exist, okay? But do I think that that's a major crisis in America? No. But what people need to understand is that even if I accept everything that's in that Washington Post article, really what they're arguing is that the reason why there are lots of white supremacists, or there's the white supremacists that do exist, the reason we have them is because of all these different reasons, and ultimately they feel really marginalized, and they feel like nobody cares about them, and they feel like their problems are somehow the result of people focusing too much on, you know, minority groups or urbanization or whatever, right? Or urban centers, however you want to frame it. At the end of the day, what they're really saying in that article is that the reason why we have white supremacy is because their living conditions are suboptimal, and they're blaming it on other people, like you were saying before, right?
Right.
But they don't think that there's an existential crisis that will kill everyone.
Right.
But they've been driven to violence and madness without that.
Sure.
Right? So what happens if we now throw an existential crisis that kills everybody onto the fire of whatever group you want to talk about? Like, that's the thing. So the Washington Post is saying it doesn't take that much to radicalize people. And
even crazier than that, because if you are like this white supremacist person and you're driven to doing something crazy or whatever because of the conditions that you find yourself in, and the blame that you're casting on other people and whatever, right? That person does something. Now, outside of their own echo chamber, they are being like told that they are this is totally unjustified and terrible and all of this stuff, rightfully so in that specific example. With climate change and all of that, even with the Extinction Rebellion, and they're blocking people in traffic or, vandalizing pipelines, if you turn to Twitter or basically any of the mainstream media, what do they get? General praise. So like the entire system, from the UN down to the corporate media, down to social media and the echo chambers of Twitter and all of that, are praising these people.
Yeah.
So it's like the power that could like magnify all of this, multiply it, I think cannot be understated.
And the other aspect to that is, what is easier to, okay, let me give you an example. There's this incredible, I don't have his name in front of me because I didn't know we were going to be talking about this sort of thing.
Okay.
But there's this incredible guy, he's an African-American guy, and what he does is he goes to rallies and things like that and tries to have conversations and sort of de-radicalize white supremacists. Like, that's one of the things that he does. Okay. And he has done this. He's achieved it by just being a nice guy and having conversations with them and building relationships. And over time, he can convince these people that actually Black people aren't the source of all of their problems, right?
Right.
So what I'm trying to say is, it's not that hard, really, to convince an even semi-rational person that being a white supremacist is not a good choice.
Sure.
Not hard to do.
Right.
But if I had to convince someone that the world is not ending from climate change, much harder. Not because there isn't data out there. There's plenty of data that suggests that the world is not ending from climate change.
No, because you're dismissed
this narrative,
as a climate climate denialist.
The whole system is designed to promote this idea that it's true.
Right.
And the other important part of that same argument is that the entire system would have to change course and say, whoa, actually, it's not an existential crisis. So calm down, guys. If, let's say we had all these Extinction Rebellion people, let's say this really caught on, and you had thousands of them flooding the streets, burning cities down to protest that we're all going to die from climate change. And the media realizing this is a problem and we need to stop these people because it's way out of control. They're like, going totally insane. Let's say that happened, right? They're killing people, maybe even. The worst case scenario you could possibly imagine. Okay, how do they reverse course? What do they do? Anything they do will undermine their credibility entirely.
Sure.
So there is no way for them to backtrack on that in a quick way. It would take years and years and years of the scientific establishment saying, actually, it's not an existential crisis, and we have new data that proves that it actually isn't as bad as we thought. Still bad, but not an existential crisis. That would take time. They couldn't just reverse that overnight. Whereas the entire establishment is constantly saying that you shouldn't be a white supremacist. There are constantly reasons that are readily available to people for not being a white supremacist, yet they still exist. Not in large number, but they still exist. That is proof of the fact that if you create the right conditions, it is very difficult to back people off of that crazy ledge once they get there. And the climate change thing is so crazy and so dangerous. It really does lend itself to, if you get enough people to believe we really are all about to die, and who knows what they'll do to try to stop it, and how will the establishment that's been selling them this narrative over and over and over again pull that back? I don't know if they can in an effective way. Right. And that's a really dangerous thing and pretty scary when you think about it.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I'm very curious how it plays out, because
like, how does the media in England talk about the Extinction Rebellion people, I wonder? Like when they're gluing themselves to banks and stopping trains and whatever, like what do they do? Do they have a negative view of them, or are they treated like heroes? Or do they not even comment on them? Isn't that a problem? that you've got people like harassing people
Well,
in the streets and doing all these things, or is it not a big enough problem yet where they say we got to really step in and do something about it?
I mean, you already brought up like the BLM stuff, and like obviously there was plenty of riots, and then you had some of the biggest news sources out there. I think it was CNN, maybe it was MSNBC, but I'm pretty sure it was CNN, where they had one of the reporters with the fires going on in the background saying that these are mostly peaceful protests. Like there was seriously one of those little like cryon lower thirds thing, one of the little scroll bars that said like fiery but mostly peaceful protests. Like,
Yeah.
so if they're treating that the way that they did, then yeah, it's gotta get real bad for them to actually like turn around and do a 180 on all of this stuff. I don't know. Like that to me is not something you should count
But the
on.
really crazy thing, though, from the perspective of the establishment, is that they're to blame. See, unlike with a lot of the BLM stuff, where it's like nobody's blaming CNN because or Democrats for what's going on with African Americans in America. Nobody was doing that, but Greta blames all of the establishment for not doing enough on climate change. So when they mob heads to the streets, they're heading to the streets angry at CNN, angry at all of these other people, angry at Joe Biden. They're mad at them too. Why aren't you doing this? See, I actually think I've got a better case to make in front of that mob than Joe Biden does. Because I can say to the mob, listen, I understand why you feel the way you do. I just don't think it's an existential crisis. That's why. Whereas Joe Biden has to stand there and say, yeah, I think it's an existential crisis, but I'm not going to do anything about it. That's a way worse position to be in. Way worse. And so I don't know, again, maybe this never happens. Maybe just people don't believe it enough to really go crazy with it. Although we've seen some polling data to suggest that younger people are disturbingly adopting this idea, increasingly higher rates of climate change being a truly existential crisis. But if enough people really do believe that, we are headed for chaos, truly chaos in the West. And it's going to be because they decided to ramp up this rhetoric that they don't really believe in for political gain, short-term political gain, and it will be very, very ugly.
Right. Yeah, it's a very interesting thing. I mean, we talked about the global shapers thing and all of the different activist groups that people like Al Gore and others in the UN, those types of elites are trying to put together, and like it's an activism arm of this movement. And to think that that this is just some like grassroots aberration and then maybe it'll just go away when this topic isn't as just in the spotlight, I think is crazy. Like this is a funded, organized thing from some of the highest levels. So I don't know. Well, I guess we'll see what happens. We do only have a few more minutes, but I want to bring up this topic. It's semi-related to this, but to me, it's like the perfect example of this concept, which is called like the vacant land myth. Okay, so if all these people, the environmental people and climate alarmists, they completely got their way. Okay, fine. We all see the light. All of your opponents are gone. We need to completely switch 100% to green energy, renewable energy, wind and solar. Okay, so let's start building it. Where are we going to build it? I don't know. Let's find some places that no one cares if we build this stuff. Maybe like the middle of the desert or something like that. Maybe the Mojave Desert. Well, nope, think again, because we've got people that will fight you tooth and nail to make sure that you don't build on their precious Mojave Desert. So this is a Los Angeles Times article. Is this really green? The fight over solar farms in the Mojave Desert. So the article starts off saying that when some people look at the Mojave Desert, they see a vast expanse of nothing. Yeah, like 99.99999% of people. But Shannon Salter sees ancient Mojave yuccas and wispy creosote bushes, shrewd kangaroo rats, and slender foxes, all living atop a hard-packed crust of rock and lichen formed over thousands of years. Quote, "There's this idea that it's a wasteland," Salter said. "No, it's a vibrant, amazing thing. We are turning it into a wasteland with all of our antics." In mid-October, Salter, a 37-year-old poet and writing teacher, moved into a campsite at the Pahrump Valley, just east of California's border in southern Nevada, to protest a solar project that she and other activists argue will irreparably damage the fragile desert ecosystem. So this is a trend that we have seen, that I've talked about numerous times, whether it's upstate New York or, San Bernardino County in California or any of these other places that are largely blue. They find it very difficult to actually erect any of these solar farms or wind farms or anything like that. So again, where are you going to build these things? Even if they got their way, where are you going to build them? If you can't build in the Mojave Desert without a poet and writing teacher protesting you, where are you going to build?
First of all, just as an aside, do you think there's much money in desert poetry and writing teaching? I have a feeling that that's not a very lucrative business. But look, this is campsite. It's a very trashy campsite, no doubt about it. Looks really bad. Although, in fairness, I don't know. Maybe it's just a bad angle. I don't know. So look, this is a huge, huge, huge problem. Huge problem for the left. One that they don't talk about ever, because they don't want to talk about it, because they can't. There is no solution.
This is one of their many problems.
But this to me is the biggest of them in a lot of ways, because this is a problem that they have to deal with internally amongst themselves.
Good point.
I mean, they can't even agree on this. So, okay, we're going to build all these solar panels and we're going to build all these wind farms. Now, what most people don't understand is it's not like you just go to the coal plant, tear the coal plant down, and then on top of the coal plant, you're going to build solar panels and windmills, and there you go, problem solved. No. Right. You actually need way, way more land to build.
Hundreds of times more land.
Yeah, way more land to build windmills and solar. And it depends on what kind of energy you're replacing or whatever. But you need way more land. And not only that, but you need to build them in ideal conditions. You can't just build solar panels in Cleveland, because that will do nothing for you. Because Cleveland is a cloudy, place with lots of rain and stuff. And they don't get much sun, so you can't survive on solar panels in Cleveland. So you got to build them further out, which means what? It means you need more electric lines running across. So that means you need even more land, because you got to build electric lines all over the place.
And the longer the transmission lines, the more energy you lose in transit.
That's right. The more you lose in transit, which means you need even more solar panels and wind turbines all over the place to make all this stuff work, right? So the amount of land that it would actually take to do this, additional land, is massive. It's massive. We're talking about, estimates vary, and no one really knows truly, because this is all so theoretical and crazy. No one's ever actually tried to do it. But I've seen estimates that say you basically need a landmass the size of California.
Yeah.
Okay, to do this.
Yeah, I've seen 2 Californias.
Yeah, I've seen all sorts of things, right? The point is this. You need lots and lots and lots and lots of land. Now, America has lots of land. Europe, they don't have any land really unoccupied, or very little. I don't know where they would put all of these things to run this stuff on. They don't have nearly as much vacant land as we do. But the idea that we in America could our vacant land is in certain places. It's not everywhere, right? It's in certain places. It's in the Mojave Desert. It's in places like that. That's where the vacant land really is.
Yeah.
And so the problem is no one lives in the Mojave Desert. See, if everyone lived there and you could just build all the solar panels there and, everyone's got one in their backyard, then I guess maybe it might work, but people don't live there. So how are we going to get the energy from the desert out to other places? How are we going to get the energy from the windy parts of the country to the non-windy parts of the country? There are no there. The truth is, it would require so much destruction of the land and the animals that live on it and the plants and all the other stuff that the left is always talking about how much they care about, that it would be an environmental disaster.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, it's the practical limitations of their plan, if it was actually attempted, are monumental. And we'll do like an entire episode on this at some point, and just like how these things can't be recycled. The wind turbines, they can't be recycled, or the solar panels break down and they have to be treated like they're like radioactive waste almost, because of the products that they use to build those things. Well, we could do an entire episode on this, but again, this is just like the practical brick wall that these plans hit, where it's everyone likes the idea of having solar panels, on the left, having solar panels and wind farms and all of that. But that runs directly into not in my backyard territory.
Right.
Where in Vermont was the other state that comes to mind, where it's like the home state of Bernie Sanders.
Yep.
They shut down this proposal to have a giant like solar farm or something there because people don't want it.
Yeah, they'd have to destroy a bunch of trees.
Yes, exactly.
To make it work.
And this is actually a point that's brought up a couple of times in that Planet of the Humans documentary, where they go into this. The Michael Moore documentary, where they talk about how so we're trading off, destruction of these environment spaces because they're trying to extract coal, but instead we're going to destroy those same places because we need a spot to put wind turbines.
More.
It's just.
We're going to destroy way more.
That's more.
That's the thing. It's way more. It's not even equal. It's not equal. It's not even close to equal. It's way, 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 way more land and animals and trees and everything destroyed. Not even close.
Like the whole offshore wind and stuff. It's like, people, I get that, there's people that are talking about like, oh, it ruins our eyesight. We want to be able to see the ocean unencumbered by all these wind turbines. Like, I understand that. Some of these other articles, like, I get it, and they exemplify this vacant land myth, but this to me was like the shining jewel example of this concept, where you have this lady standing in front of the Mojave Desert, basically saying, "Not in my backyard," and she's gonna chain herself to a cactus or something.
Yeah, without a doubt, this is a great illustration of it. The other one we've talked about a bunch of times on Stopping Socialism TV is, the fact that California still can't build high-speed rail. They've been trying to build high-speed rail for a decade in California between two of their largest cities, and they can't do it. And you know why they can't do it? Because they literally can't build the rail lines themselves, because there's too much infighting, there's too much not in my backyard, there's too much, no, the rail line should go over here, everything's way behind schedule, everything's way over cost. They can't build it. If you can't build a high-speed rail line between two super left, some of the most left-wing cities in the most left-wing state with the most left-wing government, and you still can't figure out how to do it, if you can't build solar panels in communist Vermont, okay, and I love Vermont, but it's basically a giant commune, all right? If you can't build it there, are you really going to be able to build it in Ohio and Texas and Louisiana and Florida and all? No, there's no chance. There's no chance. And
I actually think, and I know you're like trying to say some like red states, but I think you actually have a better shot of building in Texas, which they have, and which actually resulted in their blackouts earlier in the year and all of that stuff. That's a whole other topic. Maybe we'll get into it in the
not enough
episode.
That's the whole point.
I think you'd actually have a better chance of building it in Texas than anywhere along like the East Coast. Like
I totally agree with that, because there's more vacant land there.
Exactly.
There's no vacant. I mean, where most people live in America is in California or on the Eastern Seaboard. Right. That's where most people live. And so, where on the Eastern, I'm an East Coast guy. I've lived on the East Coast most of my life. There is no, if you just drive down I-95, the big highway that runs from Maine all the way to Florida, it's city after city after city after city after city.
Right.
Where the heck are you going to build all these massive? We talked about this, I think, when we did the last show, or maybe I'm just hallucinating. But we talked about the New York City, and it's like, New York City is a massive city with massive power consumption. When you drive through Jersey, Jersey is like a wasteland, northern New Jersey by New York City, because it's full of industrial facilities and power plants and all these things that are basically supporting New York City, because you can't build it in New York City because it's too full. So it's all in Jersey, right? So where are you going to build all the windmills and solar panels and all the stuff to power New York? You know how many of those you'd have to build? You have to build like 1 billion of those. Where are they going to go? Where?
And this is just one facet of this. These practical
And
limitations of this plan.
And isn't it an important facet?
Oh, it's a huge one. But
it's like, whoa, we're gonna build all these windmills and solar panels. It's like, well, the next question should be where? And there's no answer to that question. There's no answer to that question.
It's between what you do when these things need to be retired and thrown out, finding the rare earth materials to build them in the first place, just the cost of it, the
human rights violations related to the mining of some of these rare earth minerals.
Even like the birds that are getting whacked out of the sky by some of these things.
Millions
are
of birds.
Enough to drive like some people crazy.
Millions of birds is the estimate if they really were to build out all of this stuff globally.
And again, like we should do basically an entire episode on this, just because there is so much that we can go over. But we are already very long on time, so I think we should wrap it up, assuming you don't have any words of wisdom or anything you want to get off your chest out there.
No, I've said enough.
But I will say thank you all for tuning in to this episode of Justin and Donald Save America. Again, if you like the show, the easiest thing you could do to show that you like the show is just by hitting the like button, hit the subscribe button, share this video. Again, all free and all things that will help make sure that this type of content gets in front of more eyes. If you want to see more stuff on Stopping Socialism, you can go to Stopping Socialism TV, also a channel on YouTube. You can go to stoppingsocialism.com. You can find the content of those websites across various social media, whether it's Stopping Socialism on Facebook. We have an Instagram account. We have a Parler account. I think that's about it. Twitter, I think we have a Twitter account. Justin, where can the fine people find you?
At Justin T. Haskins on Facebook and Socialist Twitter and Parler and Getter and... Did I say Facebook? I think I said Facebook.
You probably
Facebook. Yep.
All right. Thank you all for tuning in. We will talk to you next week.